If there were a book in the Bible that revealed it was not directly from God that the law was given to Moses, but that it was delivered through angels, do you think that book would have been preserved in the Bible? One might assume that such a revelation would make the story even more sacred. After all, the idea that heavenly angels themselves recounted the history of mankind, every commandment, every law, every moment of creation, sounds utterly divine. A story not recorded by human hands, but delivered by the holy messengers of heaven. And yet, the truth is the complete opposite. There was once a book, passed down and honored within ancient Jewish communities, considered holy scripture by the Ethiopian Church, and even referenced in the early traditions of Christianity. That book was called Jubilees, the Book of Jubilees. Today, it has vanished from nearly all Western Bibles. It is no longer read, no longer taught, no longer mentioned in churches, on pulpits, or in Bible study classes. Why? What in this book led to its thorough removal? Was it because it contained truths too dangerous to control? Or because it unveiled a divine history so different, so radical, it could shake the very foundations that mainstream religion has spent millennia building? This isn't just a forgotten story. This is a clash between revelation and authority, between truth revealed and truth concealed. In 1947, in a remote crevice in the desert of Qumran, near the Dead Sea, a young Bedouin boy threw a stone into a cave and heard a shattering echo from deep within. No one could have imagined that this sound would unlock a door to a long-forgotten sacred treasure, the library of an isolated community who believed they were guarding the last light before the world would plunge into darkness. Among manuscripts of Genesis, Exodus, Psalms, and the prophet Isaiah, scholars discovered a text never before seen in the Western Bible. The Book of Jubilees, also known as the Book of the Jubilee Years. Unlike any historical record in the Old Testament, the Book of Jubilees makes a startling claim that the entire story from Adam to Moses was not passed down through memory or oral tradition by humans, but was directly revealed to Moses by an angel of God on Mount Sinai. Every detail, every timeline, every hidden secret between the lines was not told from the ground, but from the perspective of heaven. And there is one remarkable feature. The timeline of this book is not measured by the Babylonian calendar, nor by the lunar cycle used by Jewish tradition, nor even by the Roman calendar later adopted by the Church. Instead, every event is placed within a sacred, perfectly ordered time system, based on a cycle of 49 years, or 7 times 7 years, called a Jubilee. According to the book, Adam was created in the first year of the first cycle. The death of Abel, the wrath of the stars before the flood, God's promise to Abraham, Jacob wrestling with the angel, the life of Joseph, the suffering in Egypt, all are arranged with careful precision, as if history were a divine symphony conducted by the hand of the almighty maestro. Each point in time is not merely a historical marker, but a moment where heaven touches earth. In the vision of the Book of Jubilees, history is not a random flow, but a meticulously measured plan, cyclical, with an end. A plan shaped and intervened by angels, according to the will of God. And this leads to a profound question. If the calendar we live by and trust is the product of empire, of politics, of conquest, then could it be that the Book of Jubilees reveals another rhythm entirely, the rhythm of heaven, that we have long forgotten? Imagine, What if every day of your life, your joys, your sorrows, your turning points, beginnings and endings, were not just chance occurrences, but part of a sacred cycle written by angels? How would that change the way you view your life? Perhaps this is not merely an ancient book. Perhaps it is the map of heaven that humanity has lost. The Book of Jubilees, a name that might seem foreign, but holds within it one of the most controversial versions of biblical history. In many ancient communities, especially in Ethiopia and among the Essenes at Qumran, this book was not only regarded as scripture, but as a divine decoder of human history since Adam. Its name, the Book of Jubilee Years, does not simply describe a timekeeping concept, but a sacred framework revealed by an angel to Moses, in which every major event is linked to a 49-year cycle known as the Jubilee. This is the time period God established as a marker for forgiveness, release, and restoration. But in Jubilees, it extends not just to the people of Israel, but to the entire order of human history. Modern scholars sometimes refer to this book with another name, the Lesser Genesis, because its content retells most of the stories from Genesis and part of Exodus. From the creation of the universe, the fall of man, the lives of Abel and Cain, the great flood, the covenant with Abraham, to the calling of Moses. But what stands out here is how the story is told. No longer is the narrative attributed to Moses' own writings, as tradition holds in the Old Testament. In Jubilees, Moses is no longer the writer, but the listener. The true author is an angel, known as the Angel of the Presence, the one who stands near the glorious throne of God. This angel appeared when Moses ascended Mount Sinai, not only to receive the 10 Commandments, but to be shown the entire history of humanity from the perspective of heaven. The angel said, "All that I am about to tell you has already been written on the heavenly tablets." And these tablets, as the book presents them, are not metaphors, but actual records stored in heaven, where every moment in the life of mankind is written without error. According to the structure of the book, every event is precisely placed within the timeline of the Jubilee cycle, marked by the exact year, the specific week, and the very day. No longer is there the ambiguity found in Genesis, where events are sometimes separated by centuries with no clear reference. Here, everything is positioned as though history itself had been pre-programmed, illuminated by the eternal light. The book even emphasizes that the law was not given for the first time at Sinai. It had already existed before mankind was ever created. According to the angel's revelation, Adam kept the Sabbath. Abel offered sacrifices according to the law. The sin of the fallen angels, the watchers mentioned in the Book of Enoch, was a violation of heavenly laws that had been established from eternity past. The Book of Jubilees describes a world where law existed before the world itself. A world where God had already mapped out every step of humanity before they ever set foot on the path. And this raises a profound question. If the law was already established, kept by angels, inscribed on heavenly tablets, then what was Moses' role? And if the entire history of mankind had already been arranged, then where does human free will fit in? This question goes beyond theology. It strikes at the very root of belief. Are we living in a universe that was pre-written, with the Jubilee years acting as the eternal heartbeat of God, forgotten by most of mankind? If that's true, then why was the book hidden? And who didn't want us to read it? The angel did not recount history with cold detachment. He spoke with the voice of a witness, a living witness who had seen all things unfold since the beginning of creation. No longer was this a second-hand account passed through men, but a direct narration from the heavenly realm. The angel began at the very origin, when humanity had not yet even been named. Adam and Eve, from the very beginning, lived under laws established by heaven. The Sabbath, the laws of sacrifice, of purity, they were already in place, though the traditional Bible does not record it. But in the Book of Jubilees, the angel affirms, these laws did not originate from Sinai, but from the dawn of creation. When Adam sinned, it was not merely the fall of an individual. It marked the beginning of a chain of sin that would spread with dire consequences. The watcher angels, sent by God to watch over mankind, failed in their mission. They saw the daughters of men and desired them. From that forbidden union came hybrid beings, the giants, Nephilim, who filled the earth with violence. The angel in Jubilees does not shy away from this painful truth. He states plainly, it was angels once belonging to the presence of God who rebelled, bringing forbidden knowledge to humanity, teaching the making of weapons, enchantments, sorcery, and even the false reckoning of time. And this is the crucial point. Sin is not just an action, but a disruption of God's divine order, especially the order of time. To counter the chaos caused by the fallen angels, God re-established his order through the covenant with Abraham. Unlike in Genesis, where the covenant is presented as a spiritual promise, in Jubilees it is portrayed as a legal and historical contract, a sacred agreement between God and the descendants of Abraham, tied to the heavenly calendar. The angel emphasized, everything in Israel's history, from the lineage of Abraham, the formation of the tribes, to the exodus from Egypt, happened in cycles. 7 years formed a cultivation cycle. 7 cycles of 7 years made 49, and the 50th year was the Jubilee. More than just a time of debt release or freedom for slaves, it was the year when God would intervene in time, restoring heavenly order on earth. The angel's command was clear: keep this calendar. Mark the seasons of festivals, the times of sowing, and even the remembrance of past events, not according to the calendars of foreign nations, not the Babylonian nor Roman systems, but according to the record written in heaven, something mankind has lost. And that is where the Book of Jubilees becomes dangerous. Because if God's calendar is different from that of the empire, if the order of heaven rejects the authority of earthly kings, then who would want this book to survive? If Moses was not the first to record the history of Genesis, but merely the recipient of an angel's recounting, then the question arises, who is the true historian? The Book of Jubilees presents an idea that confounds scholars and theologians alike, that human history was not created through memory or oral tradition, but had already been written, before Moses was even born, on heavenly tablets. These tablets, mentioned repeatedly by the angel, are described as a divine archive containing the entire order of creation, not just events, who begat whom, how long each lived, when each sin occurred, but also the sacred timetable, when a nation would rise, when a promise would be fulfilled, and when judgment would fall. The angel does not claim this as a new revelation. He states clearly, all has already been written, and Moses' task is merely to copy it exactly. In Jubilees 1:27, there is a verse that shakes the foundations of traditional theology. "And you, Moses, shall write down for them all the things which I shall make known to you on this mountain, by divisions of years, year by year, according to their jubilees, as it is written and ordained on the heavenly tablets." In other words, Genesis, Exodus, even the law, are not products of human intellect, but copies of a divine original that already existed in heaven. This not only challenges Moses' role as author, but raises an even greater question. If mankind is merely the copier, where does the true origin of Scripture lie? In Jewish tradition, there is mention of the Book of Life, where every human deed is recorded. But Jubilees goes further. It declares that even the past was already written, the way God intended it to unfold, and the angel is merely the keeper of the key. But if this is true, if the history of humanity lies in the hands of a supernatural being beyond time, then what we call the past may be nothing more than a script already composed. And more importantly, who has the right to read those tablets? Who is allowed to know what is to come, and who is not? In an age when empires govern through calendar laws and rituals, to present a timetable not tied to the empire, but to heaven itself, was the most dangerous act of defiance. That idea, that the entirety of human history had already been written in heaven, was not just strange. It was nearly threatening to those who sought to control collective memory. The Book of Jubilees describes these heavenly tablets as a sacred archive where all past, present, and future events are fixed and meticulously recorded. There is no room for randomness. Nothing happens outside the plan. Every human action, every step of every nation, even each passing year, is bound to the celestial cycle established by God from the beginning. Unlike traditional concepts of history, where memory is shaped by experience, debate, failure, and victory, Jubilees insists that all has been predetermined before Moses ever penned a single word. And the shocking claim is, humans do not write history. They live within a history already written. If that is true, then the empire's efforts, from Babylon to Rome, to rewrite the past, restructure time, and dominate religious calendars, are but hollow imitations, distorted copies of the original, which lies in a place far above the reach of man. With the Book of Jubilees, time is not merely a flow, it is a divine structure revolving around fixed points. 7 days, 7 years, 7 cycles of 7 years, leading to the 50th year, the Jubilee. A system so sacred that the angel warned Moses, if the people abandon this cycle, they will fall into chaos, lose their direction, and ultimately break the covenant. This is why the book was removed, not because it was unclear, but because it was far too clear. It revealed the truth, that time and history itself are not in human hands, and certainly not in the hands of rulers. It poses a foundational challenge to every religion, every system of power. Who is telling the story of history? And what calendar are we living by? The calendar of heaven or the calendar of men? In its first dramatic climax, the Book of Jubilees lifts the veil between humanity and the divine realm, making a striking and controversial claim. The law was not given directly by God, but was taught to Moses through an angel. At first glance, this statement may seem trivial, but it shakes the very foundation of the Jewish Christian tradition. For in the canonical Bible, from Exodus to Deuteronomy, the message is consistently emphasized. The Lord spoke to Moses. Yet Jubilees tells a different story. It opens with a mysterious scene. Moses on Mount Sinai, and an angel appears, not just to deliver laws, but to recount the entire history of humanity, to explain it, reinforce it, and issue commandments. This may seem like nothing more than a stylistic difference, but in essence, it redefines the entire process of divine revelation. Instead of a direct, linear flow from God to prophet, Jubilees introduces an intermediary, an angel, acting as the agent of revelation. And this angel is not merely a messenger. He plays the role of a legislator, one who interprets history and establishes divine law. We no longer see the majestic image of God speaking from a cloud, but rather a wise, understanding angel who opens a pre-written heavenly book, explaining, warning, commanding. This shift blurs the line between apocalypse and revelation. It is no longer just God said, but the angel showed, the angel recounted. Every law, every commandment, from Sabbath observance and fasting to the offering of sacrifices according to the heavenly calendar, is given through the angel. And this is what stirred unease among religious authorities in later generations. Because if an angel can issue laws, then what separates an angel from a prophet, or even from God? It breaks down the strict hierarchy that classical theology has always upheld. More unsettling still, it gives law-giving authority to a being outside of human control. From that, a chilling question began to echo through the corridors of religious and political power. If there were other angels bearing other laws with another version of history, then is the law we hold today truly from the only source? Thus, the portrayal of the angel as a lawgiver is not merely a literary choice. It is a direct challenge to the entire theological and political framework of the post-exilic and Roman eras. While the canonical Bible makes use of flexible time markers based on historical and imperial contexts, from the reigns of kings to the calendar of Babylon or Rome, Jubilees rejects them all. Instead, it introduces a completely different system of time, a heavenly calendar operating on fixed cycles, not according to human will, but by divine design. This structure is built on a cycle of 7 years x 7 cycles = 49 years, called a Jubilee cycle. And after 49 years comes the year of Jubilee, a year of liberation, restoration, and new beginnings. In that year, slaves are freed, land returns to its original owners, and all debts are cancelled. But in Jubilees, this is more than a social command. It is a law of the universe. Every major event in history, from the birth of the patriarchs, the promise to Abraham, to natural disasters and exiles, occurs in accordance with these 7 or 49-year cycles. None of it is coincidence. It is a pre-written pattern according to sacred time. With this perspective, history is no longer a straight line as the Greeks and Romans imagined. It becomes a spiral where events recur, but each time on a higher or deeper plane. One can see echoes between the era of Cain and Lamech, between the Egyptian and Babylonian exiles, between Abraham and Moses. But rather than simply repeating, these events resonate, like echoes reverberating through space, returning within the same cycle. This leads to a bold idea that man is not the master of time, but merely lives within a stream designed by heaven. History is not written by the will of empires, but according to the heavenly tablets, cycles established at the beginning of creation. This is why Jubilees directly rejects the Babylonian and Roman calendars. It views those political time markers as distortions, a timeline that veers away from the rhythm of the universe. And if mankind continues to live by human calendars, it will drift further and further from God. Here, the concept of sacred time becomes a form of resistance. It is a declaration that history is not recorded by kings, but preserved by angels. And if that is true, then the control of time, the very tool empires use to rule, is called into question. It is no coincidence that a book like this was removed, because when you change how people perceive time, you also change how they understand history, power, and salvation. And that, for both religious and political institutions of the time, was unacceptable. But perhaps the most threatening aspect of the Book of Jubilees isn't merely its doctrinal differences, it's that it posed a subtle but deep challenge to the structures of power, both political and religious. First, Jubilees does not submit to the calendar systems of Rome or Babylon. While most canonical books measure time according to the reigns of kings, in the 10th year of King Darius, in the 4th year of Emperor Augustus, Jubilees declares, no, history must be measured by God's rhythm, not Caesar's. In a world where calendars were tools of control, rejecting the political calendar was an act of rebellion. Whoever holds time defines history, and Jubilees took that power away from the empires. Second, the Book of Jubilees dismisses the central roles of emperors, priests, and even the human church. In its vision, law is not issued by kings, not interpreted by clergy, but delivered directly from an angel to Moses. The angel, not a king, not a pope, becomes the guardian of the law and the overseer of history. This drastically diminishes the role of the religious hierarchy in the post-exilic period and the early church, where power was built upon the assumed position of mediator between man and God. More profoundly, the Book of Jubilees removes the entire legislative process from human hands. When law is revealed from the heavenly realm, unchangeable, non-negotiable, then every discourse of reform, adaptation, or even religious governance becomes invalid. This leads us to the third reason. Jubilees declares that the entire history of humanity has already been written on the heavenly tablets. Every major event, from the fall of the angels to the birth of nations, is part of a divine blueprint. Humanity is simply living out a script already ordained. So then, who could still believe that the reigning emperor decides the fate of the world? Who would dare to preach that the church holds the keys to heaven? No. In the world view of Jubilees, mankind does not hold history. History is destiny, recorded by angels under the light of God. And that is unacceptable to empires, those powers that built their authority on the declaration, "We are the center of time. We are the end of history." With Jubilees, that claim crumbles, and thus the book was removed. Not because it was too heretical, but because it was too powerful, so powerful that it threatened to dismantle the very machinery of control that earthly forces had long sought to preserve. If you are familiar with the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, then when you read Jubilees, you'll sense something strange, something different. It's not a copy, nor a summary, nor a commentary. It is a complete retelling of the beginning of history, but from a heavenly perspective. While Genesis recounts events as a sequence of stories passed down and recorded by humans, Jubilees is explicit. These events were transcribed from heaven, dictated by an angel to Moses. That is, instead of history being told from earth looking up, here it is from heaven looking down. This shift changes the entire understanding of humanity's origin and purpose. For instance, in Genesis, sin enters the world through the fall of man, Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit. But Jubilees expands that picture. Sin came not only from humans, but also from the fallen angels, the Watchers, who descended to earth, took human women, and fathered half-demonic offspring called the Nephilim. These beings not only brought violence, but also taught humanity sorcery, bloodshed, and practices opposed to the will of God. And that, according to Jubilees, is the true reason the Great Flood came, to wipe out the demonic bloodline that had corrupted God's creation. A perspective not emphasized in Genesis, but central to Jubilees. Moreover, Jubilees assigns precise timing to events that are otherwise symbolic. Cain and Abel were not just born after Adam and Eve. The book states clearly, Cain was born in the 4th year after their expulsion from the garden, Abel in the 5th. No more ambiguity. Everything is anchored to an exact heavenly timeline, as if reading from a divine record. Eve in Jubilees is portrayed as far more than simply the mother of all living. She speaks prophetically, warns of the consequences of sin, and at times seems to understand God's intentions for future generations, a role not highlighted in Genesis. Thus, Jubilees does not contradict Genesis. It fills in the gaps, expands the foundation, and, perhaps most importantly, redefines who is telling the story. If Genesis shows us history through the lens of human memory, Jubilees lifts us higher to see history that was pre-written, where humans are not merely characters, but links in a grander divine design, and that, precisely that, is what makes the book so dangerous. When we look at the full story of the Book of Jubilees, we realize this is not merely an alternate version of Genesis. It wasn't excluded because it was too similar or too different. It was excluded because it asked questions that were too big, too threatening. It forced people, especially those holding religious and political power, to confront an unsettling reality. The law does not come from man. History is not in the hands of kings. And time is not something to rule, but something to listen to. Jubilees boldly declares what few other books dare to say, that angels delivered the law to Moses, that the law did not come from a grand public ritual at the foot of Sinai, but from a silent, sacred revelation, recorded according to the calendar of heaven. This overturns the power structure built on the question of who has the right to declare the law. The book also dares to break the political timeline, not aligned with Babylon, not submitted to Rome. Instead, it presents a 7-year and 49-year cycle leading to the year of Jubilee, when debts are cancelled, slaves are freed, and land returns to its original owner. A year when power is reset. No wonder it was erased from history, because it serves no master but God. And finally, Jubilees emphasizes, history has already been written on the heavenly tablets. This doesn't just challenge our view of the past, it redefines our view of the present. If history is a pre-written narrative, then what script are we living in now? Who is reading it back to us? Who is cutting out the chapters? Perhaps the most hidden books, the ones left out of the Western Bible, are the ones holding the deepest secrets. about the structure of time, about the laws of the universe, and about the never-ending dialogue between heaven and humanity. So perhaps the final question is not, why was the Book of Jubilees banned? But rather, what have we lost by letting it disappear? If something in your spirit has awakened, hold on to that feeling. Because on the journey to uncover the hidden books, sometimes their silence speaks the loudest. Imagine that scene. Moses, alone at the summit of Sinai, not only receiving stone tablets, but listening as an angel recounts the entire history of the world, from the very beginning up to his own time, not in human words, but from a written record copied directly from the heavenly tablets. These are the lines from the opening chapter of the Book of Jubilees. I will write down for you the things that have been recorded and preserved on the heavenly tablets, the things handed down through every generation, so that you may teach the children of Israel, so that they will not go astray in the days to come. And in chapter 2, the angel adds, all that has happened has been arranged precisely according to the weeks of the years, each cycle set in order. Nothing is random, and nothing is forgotten. I am telling you, Moses, because everything on earth reflects the pattern of heaven. And so the question arises, if the entire history of humanity is really a copy of something first written in heaven, then what chapter are we living in? Are we entering the final pages, or are we still somewhere in the middle of the story? And could it be that some chapters have been erased from human memory, yet still shine brightly on the tablets of heaven? The Book of Jubilees is not just an ancient manuscript. It is an invitation, a calling. Let yourself be the one to step into the journey of decoding sacred time, because maybe you are living in a passage that was written by heaven and is waiting for you to read it again. If you ever believed that Genesis was the beginning, then Jubilees is the doorway into a deeper layer, where history is not just told, but inscribed before time itself began. If that stirs something within you, if you believe there are truths never spoken in the Bible, then share this video and join us in awakening the memory that was buried in the shadows of the church, beneath the dust of centuries under control. And what about you? Which forbidden book should we unlock next? The Book of Enoch, where humanity was taught by fallen angels. The Book of Adam and Eve, with the years of exile never told in Genesis. Or an unwritten apocalypse, not from the vision of John, but from those who have watched the universe unfold from above. Leave a comment. Be part of the journey to uncover the forgotten, because maybe you are the one who's been searching for the book that was taken from mankind.